All right, I'm going to call this meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education to order. This is our February meeting, and at this time I would ask that we all rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will begin with public comment, but I have no one signed up for public participation. So going once, twice, three times. All right. I will move to new business. I would ask at this time for a motion to take the student representative recommendation out of order and move that to the front of the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jess Anders, who was the head of our committee that assessed the applications for student representatives.
So I guess I will just report that, number one, I'm sorry the process took so long, and that was entirely my fault for just being so busy and overwhelmed and not getting to it more quickly, but we're very excited. We had a really great batch of nominations. It was extremely hard to pick somebody, but in the end, we went with a student who wrote a very eloquent application and made a really good argument for why he would be representative of both the student body and do a good job here, and felt like he had experience that would speak to a lot of other students in the city, and had really made a lot of progress in his own life. And so we would like to recommend to the full board that we accept Joseph Trinidad as our student representative.
So I have a motion to approve Joseph Trinidad as the student representative for the Lawrence Alliance for Education on the floor.
Second.
Do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries, and at this time, we would ask Joseph to please come up and take a seat with the board, and we are excited to have you. Met Joseph earlier tonight, and I have a sense of a couple of things right away. One, Joseph is not going to hesitate to ask questions or offer opinions when he feels so moved on any matters, which we greatly appreciate, and we look forward to hearing your voice on behalf of Lawrence students. And second, I have a feeling you will be a leader in Lawrence. You already are in many ways and will continue to be for a long time to come. And appreciate the work of the committee in recommending Joseph, and we'll just note very quickly that he's a 17-year-old senior at the Upper School Academy at Lawrence High School, the oldest of three, and a member of Lawrence Youth in Action. Joseph, is there anything you'd like to say at this time? Or any comments you'd like to offer?
I just want to say thank you for.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, now you.
With such distinguished members of the community. As a matter of fact, we all are, because we are here today, which goes to show how much we care about our community and our education. And just thank you for this amazing opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph.
I do want to say something.
Noemi?
So I was very surprised that he's here, and this is like by chance. We both are wearing the same sweater. Yeah. I know him because he spent a lot of time in my office for the good reasons. Yeah, he always has many good questions, and you kept this as a secret. You never told me. Seriously, we need to talk again. So I'm very glad that he's here, and I'm very proud that he's here too. So.
And before we move on, I just want to note presence of some other leaders in Lawrence and Lawrence Public Schools specifically. Enrique Matos from the Lawrence School Committee is here. Enrique, if you can just say hi, thank you. We really appreciate you coming. Greatly appreciate it. Kim Barry, Lawrence Teachers Union President, is here. Greatly appreciate that. Kim, I know you won't stand up. You don't like to get that, but we always appreciate your presence here and your leadership and all the great work of your teachers. Would also mention Eric Blanchette from AFT is here, and Kathy Delaney, Cheryl Travers, Brenda Gregg, Mindy Richardson, and Teresa English, all from LTU here as well, and greatly appreciate their presence. At this time, I'll turn it over to the superintendent for her report.
Thank you so much. So just a few highlights, points of pride in our district since we last met. I wanted to circle back with you all that we did have our LHS accreditation celebration. Thank you, Noemi and Mayor Rivera, for attending. It was a great time for us to recognize the enormous talent and hard work that our teachers and staff have done over the past few years to maintain accreditation. I also wanted to give you an update in our headmaster search. When we last met, we had just begun the process. And since we have screened candidates, the Selection Advisory Committee has winnowed out candidates and has submitted 2 semifinalists. Yesterday, we had one of our semifinalists interview with 5 focus groups. They met with students, they met with 2 teacher groups, administrators, central office leaders, as well as parents. On Thursday, we've invited another semifinalist, and we will keep you informed of the next process. As a reminder, we mentioned that we will have a finalist round, and we plan to do that in March. You're all invited to that, but we will send invitations and updates about the headmaster search. I also wanted to highlight that you all voted and gave the JRTC students access to going on their trip to London, and I'm going to find my notes momentarily about that opportunity. So thank you again for that. And lastly, I just wanted to congratulate the students in our performing arts. They performed Jesus Christ Superstar, and it was a great performance. I'm going to invite the design team, SMMA and Pink, to join us as we queue up and tee up this presentation and an update on the Oliver School building project. So if you can all join us at the table and guide us through the quick update, that would be great. Thank you so much. I think you need, Dave, do they need this?
I just want to mention while we queue up the deck here that Patricia Mariano is joining us by phone and is on the line right now.
Good evening. Thank you for having us back in front of you for an update on the Oliver Partnership School project. My name is Deborah Marai. I'm with the owner project management firm of Pink & Company. My colleague Danny Garber-Letitia is with us as well, as is Alex Pitkin and Kristen Olson from the design firm SMMA. So we were with you last month, provided an update on the project. So today, we are doing a little bit of the same. I want to let you know that since we last met, what the team has been working on is development of the preferred schematic report, which is a submission to the MSBA, the next step in the process. During this process, there's further investigation and development of the options. Of the options that were moved forward from the earlier phase, the preliminary design program phase. There were 3 main options that the building committee wanted to move forward with. And then the MSBA also asked us to continue to look at a code upgrade and a 500 student renovation addition of the Oliver Partnership. But the other 3 options were the 736 student renovation addition of the Oliver Partnership, the Stone Mill, and the Gateway Parking, which were both 1,000 students. So this process is a very thoughtful and involved process, and it often brings up things that we need to know about before we move forward with projects. So what we want to do tonight is bring you through a little bit of the process, which the presentation that you received was based on a vote of the building committee to move forward with the Stone Mill project. But I think you'll be hearing a bunch of different things that have come up and questions that have come up that will maybe having us take a pause from that and look at other options going forward. So I just wanted to know, I know you saw this presentation already, it is based on that, but we're also going to be talking a little bit more about the Oliver Partnership site as well. So Alex, if you want to.
Thank you, Debbie. So just launching from where we were, we had submitted, obviously acronym heavy, the preliminary design program back in November, and the preferred schematic report was due to be submitted tomorrow on 12/13 for the Stone Mill site. And I'll just talk about some of the things that we've been continuing to analyze, which is part of the MSBA process. So the tasks that get performed in the PSR phase, that there are fewer sites. We had a more extensive grouping of options, as Debbie had mentioned. The additional information that we collected for the PSR phase was additional analysis at the preferred Stone Mill site. And that was obviously due to many of the unique circumstances that we had spoken with you about that you were well aware of. So there was a site survey that was done. There was geotechnical borings that were done that were conducted in the area of the addition, which was primarily composed of the gymnasium and some of the more community-oriented spaces at the southern end of the Stone Mill. There was further structural analysis based on the geotechnical investigations, substructure of the Stone Mill site. Obviously, it's been there for well over 150 years, but some of the conditions that would add to our understanding of the substructure under the existing building and also for the addition based on those soil characterizations. And the soil characterization, a lot of conversation with our geo-environmental consultant and the conversations about soil characterization because we have no information on that part of the Aerojet site. So it's sort of a commingling of both the Stone Mill site and the Aerojet site, which the city will eventually take control over. And so that kind of information is not fully known. We knew that going into the PSR process, and our next phases, we're fully anticipating that we would be triggering what's called a phase 2 investigation, and that we would probably be wanting for your risk assessment that investigation sooner than later. So those were the kind of conversations that we've been having with the school building committee and the mayor's office over the last few weeks, let's say. We had done some additional test fit plans, obviously with some understanding that the 1,000 students is absolutely critical, and that we wanted to ensure that while also making sure that we were fitting as close as we could within the guidelines of the MSBA requirements, which was, so we were sort of exceeding that square footage, which is not unusual with a building such as the Stone Mill. The big change that comes about with the PSR is that we have a cost estimator at the PDP, and then as required by the MSBA process, we have 2 cost estimators that are engaged with this additional information. Those 2 estimators work independently. They bring those numbers to us and to Debbie and her team, and then our job is to put them in the same room and to reconcile those numbers and make sure that everybody is thinking the same way, has the same values, understands the market conditions, which I assume many of you are very aware of some of the cost conditions that are going on in the market today. So they're still not detailed design estimates. They're still very conceptual drawings. So it really does utilize professionals, our specifications and calculations and back and forth with both our engineering and our design team on all the different criteria going forward into the design. Then there's, with a project like this, there's a lot of conversation about contingencies, protecting the city going forward, cost escalation, and what's happening in the market today. And so we all know that when we came before you with the PDP, we already had a project that was tracking, I think, at $140 million project costs, and our numbers were rising from there. And things like contingencies and escalations, which are straight multipliers, really only adding to that. So we wanted to make sure that we were really all on the same page and bringing that information as quickly as possible to the committee. Clicker's a little slow here. Just a little bit of background information for those wondering what's going on in the marketplace. And every project is unique. It's really important that you don't just kind of dig in, and there were, I think, 50-some projects that your team evaluated, right? Maybe more. What we did is we did cherry pick. We cherry picked the projects that were closest that we could find to the conditions that our project was bringing forward. So you can see that a lot of that at this early stage is based on population. So we looked for schools that were, as close to 1,000 students as possible, and our general gross square footage area. Some of these have actually completed construction. Brookline opened just this last fall, and many of the other projects are actually only in their schematic design and have been approved by the MSBA, and that's why it would show up on the MSBA website. And then in parentheses, you can see addition, renovation, and new projects, which in today's market is a very important indicator for how many subcontractors and contractors that you will get to bid on a project in the public realm. And then, of course, elementary schools and middle schools. The Devotion School is a K-8. I think it's the only one up there that's a pure K-8 like our project, and the others, would be a blend. And so those all kind of put you in this dollar range that I've circled in red over there, that, at $140 million, okay, we're kind of in the game, maybe. And then as our estimates were kind of going up from there, it was maybe starting to at least make us want to raise that caution to the city.
And as a point of clarification, the numbers on here, we did take these schools and the information from the MSBA website, and the dollars were based on the assumed total project budget at schematic design, because that's the information we had readily available to us. And then we escalated it to the same point of the escalation of our project, so we can compare apples to apples. So we took some raw information based on a part of the process we're very close to with this project, and escalated it just so you can see comparison to other projects of similar size that are going on today.
So in the cost estimating world, you just get closer to the actual number, the closer your documentation is, thousands of pages, specifications, and so everybody is operating under the same need to have escalation and contingency protection. Perfectly normal part of the process which MSBA supports.
So I'm going to make you say all of that again in
Okay.
plainer English, because that is my major question. Can you go back a slide?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So what you're saying, so first question, the numbers that are over there in red
Yep.
for the projects that have been completed,
Most of them have
most of
not
them
been
have
completed.
not, have any of them been completed?
Just the top one,
Just
the
the
Brookline
Brookline
Devotion.
one. So was 154 million what the project actually wound up costing?
The numbers that we did for this exercise, we took information on the MSBA website. All the numbers come from a schematic design point.
Which is the same point that we're at in this
It's close to the point
process.
we're at, correct.
Okay.
And for a total project budget, and we took the numbers that were on the website for that schematic design submission that they had.
Okay.
And escalated them to the same point we are escalating for the start of construction. So if you went to the MSBA website, you wouldn't see these numbers, you'd see a different number. We took the same multiplier that we would use for all projects and brought them up to the same point in time as our project would be to compare apples to apples.
And how do you choose what that multiplier
We
is?
talked to the cost estimators about what the escalation it's usually, they often do it by quarter, and we talked to them about what we should be using for a multiplier. Looked at what their assumed start of construction date was, what our assumed start of construction date was, ramped them up based on the multipliers that are used in the marketplace based on real numbers about what
Okay,
escalation
so
is.
it's based on inflation over time is
Yes,
basically what it
escalation
is.
is
That
a
that
very-
was
yep.
my key question.
Correct, yes.
But
Okay.
construction inflation, not.
Not-
you know,
Not, right, not
Correct.
consumer price index inflation, right, okay. Okay, that was one question. So, second question is, how does the square footage of these guys compare to, because the stone mill's not that big, is it? I thought the stone mill was like 150,000 square feet,
I think we were at 175.
or 175?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, all right, so it's comparable to?
Yep,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, all right. And then my third question is, do we know what the Brookline project actually wound up costing?
I actually did not check, no.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions on that slide while we're here?
Well, I guess just the question, I mean, I'm hearing the original 140 and that it's escalated based on the contingency. What's the new number that you all are working under?
So right now, we were recommending that we hold $172 million. So that was not just escalation and contingencies, it was the analysis by our civil engineering team and our consultants on the site conditions, and that primarily influenced three things. How much soil we were recommending that we plan on removing from the site for environmental conditions. Not knowing the characterization, the soil could turn out to be pretty good. And that's a worst-case scenario. And then you have to bring soil back in that's clean to remitigate the site. And then the impacts of what we found in those geotechnical borings that were influencing our concerns for the structure of the addition of the building, that we might have to do special foundations. Again, not unusual, but it is more costly to do, say, piles, and that was somewhat coupled with the geo-environmental conversation between the engineering teams. And then the other was knowing that we don't know the full picture of the stone mill structure and not having any view to what the soil conditions are underneath the existing slab. Again, we generally think it should be fine. It's been there for 150 years. But being cautious with any new columns and structure that would go inside that building to support new programs within the stone mill. Those were kind of the new factors that we were bringing to the team.
A lot of the caution around, making sure that we're carrying sufficient contingencies for potential risks has to do with the fact that for the preferred schematic report, the project that, the decision on the project to move forward with is what you will live with in the MSBA process. You're not buying the project, you're not agreeing to a cost, but you need to know generally what that the cost of the project is to make the decision on which option to move forward with. In the MSBA world, once you submit on the preferred schematic report and you put forward this preferred option, that is the project you're moving forward with.
And then we would be committed to the next process, which is schematic design, and then we come back with all phase 2 environmental information. Could be better information, could be the same, could be worse. We would have better structural analysis. We would, if we were moving forward, we would recommend a lot more work done on that than the MSBA process requires in schematic design, just because of the special nature of that. And obviously the geo-environmental piece, which just bears repeating. So, but to Debbie's point, the schematic design process in the MSBA world means you are traveling down a road and a path, and we're designing a project. You're spending money on design fees and the team's effort, and you get to the end and you don't like what you are hearing, we have to backtrack and come back to this point and then choose another path. So that's why this is such an important milestone and decision-making point.
I do have a question. So going back to the 172 millions, correct?
Yes.
Does that include then, if I understood correctly, the remediation piece? The worst case scenario?
Well, as best as we see
Yeah,
it right now,
but-
yes.
okay.
That was, yeah, so we were, you're talking ranges, and so if we were in that 140 to 170 range, that's a pretty big swing. So that was kind of the
Okay,
values that we were putting out there.
okay, thank you.
I have a question pertaining to the environmental. You noted here that the environmental issues are high risk. Is there a plan B in case you get to that point and it's determined that the school cannot be built there?
So I think that's why we're here with a slightly different presentation tonight. The building committee tonight has taken a vote to kind of take a pause and to support going with further investigation. So we were, rightfully so, this was a really exciting opportunity for the city investigating the stone mill. There are a few things that we need to do for the MSBA process at the Oliver site that won't take a lot of time, but they will take a little bit of time. And then the building committee will then vote to probably support, more than likely support moving forward at the Oliver site with the 736 student school, grades 1 through 8.
So,
Go ahead.
I have the distinct pleasure of being the chair of the building committee, and I think it's one of those things where, when we started talking about the Oliver School and its needs, and all the educators got together and went through the ed plan, and what could we best do for the kids who go to school there and in surrounding neighborhoods? Man, it would have been a great thing to be able to do 1,000 seats in a brand new structure, an ed plan that was open and modern and all those things. And, even at 140, it would have been a stretch for us. We would have probably had to do some things that we wouldn't have liked financially, the markets wouldn't have liked. But I think it would have been worth the hit to get 1,000 seats in a modern building, with a lot of space where there is no space now. But I think what we know about, what we don't know about it now that we did, that I thought we might have known about it, is the amount of money it would have costed us to deal with them. It's not a small amount. It's a big amount to deal with the remediation. And so it was at the 140 that had remediation money in it too. But I think that the experts got together and they got kind of scared. And I'm just using plain language. There's probably a technical term for that.
I think there's
They
more
got more
risk, yeah.
cautious about, what we should budget for. And the reality is that, even if there was a will to go forward, there really isn't the money to go forward. And it's unfortunate because we are losing seats, but this one, I think the idea is if we can get some information in the short term. By the way, we missed the window to get this thing before the MSBA in April, and now it's gonna be in front of the MSBA in June. We missed it anyway, but it's not something that we could have changed. And I only say that to say that the time that we're gonna use now to find out about the Oliver School current site is not, it's not wasted time. It's time that's important to have to make a decision on it. I will say we have not made a decision to pivot to the Oliver School. I think that was very clear to me tonight. I was trying to get the committee to make a firm commitment to pivot away from the stone mill, given the financial situation. They wanted more information, and I thought that was fine. I mean, I couldn't get a firm commitment to just move. But all that being said, I think that the idea that the place where we are now is that once we get more information, the building committee will revisit whether or not to present to this board to keep going with the stone mill or to pivot to the Oliver. That's what I think is before us.
Yeah, and so I'll add that part of the hesitation and lack of commitment this evening is that we have to reconcile a couple things here. We have to reconcile that pivoting to this option now means we don't get to satisfy an educational plan. And so that also means that we have to think about the actual number of additional seats the seats that we lose. We actually have to think about the disruption in the education of students because we have to consider swing space and just the overall design of the school that we had envisioned, that we deeply believe, our kids have been waiting for. So that's really hard to reconcile. And so we brought this forth today to the building committee, where I think the committee is open to revisiting. We don't want to scrap a project because that seems also irresponsible, but it's hard to reconcile that. And in my role, I feel really strongly that I have to advocate for the educational plan and that I have to look at the long game and think about in 5 years from now when we need additional 300 seats and we don't have it, what does that mean for our community? So I think the building committee just requested additional information from the design team, and they have that fancy language that I think we were trying to look for. But in plain English, they have to dig up stuff. They have to look at traffic design, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
And bring it back to the committee in order for us to then come back to you all with a vote and a recommendation.
Thank you. Thanks for that information. That brings me back to the high risk of the soil characterization, because I can see that we don't want to lose the opportunity to add 300 more seats. But at the same time, my biggest concern is the children. If we need to jeopardize the health of these children, then I'm not in favor of going with this site. Even if that means that we will lose those 300 seats, we will have to look for other alternative buildings. But the reason I bring up this issue is because if we're looking at the issue with the contamination at this site, I think it won't be too hard to, at the same time, keep looking at other options so that in case this doesn't work, we already have the other option that we had already looked at. And I understand that right now it's just the Oliver, but maybe we should have something in place so that, because by the time you find out what the risks here at the stone mill buildings are, you might be too much into the schematics that you're working on right now. So maybe it won't be too hard to look at alternatives.
As we were evolving, we were assuming that had we submitted, had all of this vote gone through, that we were anticipating that the MSBA would probably look at this and probably ask you and us to go through that phase 2 analysis before you overcommit to the schematic design, that we would get a full assessment of that, because that number there would be no intention of leaving anything that could be harmful to children at that site. That, was crystal clear to the cost estimators, and that's priority number one.
And the requirements of the MSBA as well.
Correct.
The only thing that I would add to that is that I think, I don't want to make it seem like we're not thoughtful. That we expected there to be something there, yes. The problem is that the experts looked at it and they thought it was going to be so much more. And then that's not a guarantee that that's all of it. And then if you add on top of that, that if we take it and buy it and then we own it, and we find out that it's more, then we own that too. And I just don't have, it just scares me that we would be in a situation to do that. And I'm looking for a school to maybe be named after me, but not in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just can't, I will lose sleep at night about it. And so I was never concerned that we could never make it clean enough. That I was clear about. I'm actually pretty shocked that we don't know more about that small section where the addition's gonna be. Just don't know enough about it.
I think that is, the point is about the unknowns, and I think that's a little bit of what changed along the way, is that there was some additional investigation done that raised some questions, and therefore there's this thought about risk and having to make sure that if you move forward, you know the potential high-end number of that risk. But right now, we don't know certain things about the site. There is a path that you would go down to do more investigation of the stone mill, but there's a cost associated with that and a timeline associated with that. So that's part of the decision-making process as well.
And we have decided as a committee that we will,
Go down that path.
I want to make sure I said it right when we did decide, that we would stop looking at the stone mill and continue to look, and to begin looking at the Oliver site pivot.
Right.
But we have not made a decision to go in either path. Well, we haven't got any decision to change the path which we already chose, which was the stone mill.
The preferred,
The committee decided to go down the stone mill path. It does not bode well with the MSBA to have a split committee.
correct. And part of the pause is
So
because
we
of that.
want to make sure that we're all clear about, and part of that discussion is to look at the pivot idea. Could we pivot to the Oliver School? What does that look like? The stuff in the ground, and the traffic and all those things, and can we get to the 736, right? I mean, it's way too late in the day. And so that's the pivot. We made a decision to go down the Stone path. The question before the committee now, and I want to characterize it correctly, is that we're going to look at the Oliver School idea, which is option 4, to see if that is actually a clear pivot. We don't want to say, oh, we're going to go to the Olivers and then find out there's $100 million worth of work to do there.
Correct.
What I told the committee, and I'll share with you, is the good news is that school was probably there when there was 5 buildings on that other site, so I'm pretty sure that's been a school site for a very long time. The hope is that there won't be any surprises. So to your point, we have a backup plan.
So, but I want to be clear, we are going to do a phase 2 on the stone mill site.
No.
I have not decided
What-
that yet.
Okay, so, and is cost the only thing that's stopping us from doing that? Because if going to the stone mill site would, putting cost aside for just 1 minute, I know that's incredibly difficult to do, right? If going to the stone mill site in all other ways meets the ed plan, meets the current and growing future needs of the city, I feel like, okay, how can I say this? Having developed mill sites in the past, it can be very possible that you could have intense contamination on one site and hardly anything on an adjacent site. And so I know that we all had reservations about the Gateway site for good reason, and that option is off the table. But I think it's very much worth doing the phase 2 on the stone mill site to understand exactly what it is that we are dealing with. That's short money to be able to make a really informed decision about something that's going to affect the future of the, of the infrastructure for education.
Yeah, and what I would say, and that question came up, and they actually did some work to find out how much it would cost. It was like $28,000. Did I get that $25,000?
Yeah, we took a two-tiered approach when we talked with the geoenvironmental and geotechnical engineer, and because time was of the essence to get to tonight and to the submission, we were going to do a limited one. So there's utilities that have to come into the building, and so we were going to actually test along the utility core, because that goes down into soil.
But it was like 25?
So it was between
8?
15 and 20 for phase one, and I think they were saying 40 to 50 for the full phase two reporting.
I
When you
read
say
that
phase one, you
email
didn't
wrong.
mean
Phase two.
Yeah.
I read
The
that
first
email
part of
wrong.
it.
First part of phase two.
Yes.
So it's not, it really isn't about money. What I told the architects is that unless whatever we do can drop the number below back to 140. When I tell you that 140 was gonna be a stretch, they talk about 140 being reimbursed through the MSBA at 80%. It's not really 80% because they have a static square foot construction cost, and that number is not real. It's like maybe a 10-year-old number. And today, construction cost at the rate when you use government money is like considerably higher than that. So really, our reimbursement is 60%. So the decision, unfortunately, trust me, I'm using the word sober about it because I did have dreams of this being a beautiful school, but we just made a decision on the spreadsheet. There's no way, unless it comes down to 140, and again, when I tell you it was going to be a stretch to get to 140, that is not an exaggeration. We wouldn't have to do some exotic budgeting to get it done, but it would have been worth it for the 1,000 seats, for the type of school we were going to build. But even if we spend the $15,000 and we find out that it's not 170, that it's 155, 160, the CFO would not sign off on that. He would just say there's no way we could leverage ourselves that far.
Okay, so now I have a question for Pink, and this is more a financial structuring question, and you guys may or may not know the answer to this, but are there any situations in which a municipal project like this could partner with a private developer and take advantage of things like new market tax credits or other financing mechanisms that would help alleviate that cost, because you'd be bringing more equity into the project and to the table?
Hitting on a topic Alex brought up recently,
Yeah.
that we have seen some things like that happen. UMass Boston did a public-private partnership for a dorm building recently. The MSBA has not, to date, gotten involved in any public-private partnerships. And as far as I know, there's nothing close enough lined up that this project could, we'd say, oh, they're making a decision on doing a pilot or something like that. It's not at that point, from what I know. I'd have to ask around a lot more, but I have not heard anything about the MSBA. Have you, Alex?
No, the only thing is the regulations do say, let's say that somebody was renovating the stone mill today and they were going to fit it out as an entity and lease it back to the city for a long term. In theory, the regulations say you can use, they will support that action, but I don't know what the financial way of doing that is.
Yeah.
It probably.
In a public procurement way, yeah.
It would probably require some kind of act with the legislature
would,
to
yeah.
achieve that.
But you don't, so I guess that would be one way to do it, but there's nothing in the MSBA regulations that would prohibit a public-private partnership from,
I can't answer that question
Because
one way or the
Can I
other.
guess the hesitation you're hearing is that MSBA money is really good,
yeah.
but it's really hard to work. Anything that looks outside of the templates that they run, they would rather just say no.
And they're run completely as if it's a straight publicly procured project. And that's
Yeah.
the way the regulations are written, that they follow. I don't know the exact answer to your question. I don't know if you know.
And they've gotten to this, I don't mean to be carry water for the MMCA, but they've been burnt along the way doing things with communities. and Newton High School was probably the most public one of all, where the cost went just so crazy. And so I think that they are just, we will help you build a school if you do it this ABC way, and it makes it really hard to be entrepreneurial.
And the only other thing, if you wanted to use an analogy, would be the charter school mechanisms for funding, right? Where that is done through DCAM, not through the MSBA, and those schools are not billed to the same rigorous standards. So, you know, if you go into them, you can see less square footage per student, you know, fewer program availabilities, things like that. I'm not denigrating charter schools the way they do it, but that model is built by developers, not using public funding, but the public funding goes towards the support of the operations of that school, and that's why DCAM oversees that.
And, I mean, the one thing I will say about the MSBA is that they're taking taxpayer dollars and then distributing them for these projects. And their whole rigorous, administrative and rules and templates that you follow are all about that. And their theory is, this is what we're agreeing to pay. If we end up not paying that for some reason, then it goes to the next school. So, for example, what they typically do is if a project got money from a utility, from a donor, from whoever, that then comes off of what they are reimbursing against.
I see.
So that's their philosophy. It's all about public money going into public schools. What we don't use on this school, we then use on the next school. So that's what I do know about the.
So even if you were able to structure some kind of public-private partnership, it's likely that would just reduce the MSBA's contribution.
I'm not sure it's possible, given their philosophy. It might be possible without the MSBA's support, but I'm guessing not with it. It's a very interesting question, no doubt, but I don't think that conversation is close to helping.
The other thing that we have is pressure, and I don't want to hog the mic, the pressure is that we have the Leahy School coming behind it.
Yeah.
And because of the size of the Leahy and its site, that is one with a lot less questions and a lot less issues. That's gonna it's actually moving a lot faster than, I shouldn't say that. It's moving at the right pace. It's going through at the right pace. And so we have to make sure we're making the decisions about financing, but also the decision about capacity and all that stuff, so we can, it was said to us at the meeting that it's, MSBA is concerned to have 2 shovels in the ground on 2 big projects this size. I have no doubt that our staff could take care of that, and make commitment to even add staff as needed for the accomplishment of that, to help the superintendent staff, because we need the seats, and we need to update the Leahy. And so if we come to a point where it's about, we have enough FTEs to watch the project and to make sure it happens right, I think that the commitment is so small for an FTE or 2 to build both schools, but that's the other pressure, is that this school is coming hard and fast behind it.
And we can't switch them? Like, we can't switch the order and do the Leahy first, so that we have more time to figure out the Oliver?
Well, the backup plan to all of the sites was stepping aside and letting Leahy go next first. But it would be first in the sense that just let it take its course. We couldn't move it up.
I see.
Because you would need swing space for the Leahy, as I currently understand it.
Right.
It seems to me that the Stone Mill project is, based on what I'm hearing tonight and the geo-environmental issues that we have, seems to be a long stretch. So I would encourage the building, is it a committee? Okay, I'm sorry. The building committee to look at both sites simultaneously, so that in case something cannot be presented because of this issue, that we already have the backup plan. And I don't know if you probably have done some of this work, but the city should have a lot of information pertaining to this site. Going back to the year 2000, Mr. Mayor, maybe you can find that. The year 2000, when the commitment between the tire company, the state and the city was put together in order to create the, Genco, right? In order to create the gateway. So all of that was already done, and I remember amazing myself that one of the things was that there was not to be any construction on that site, and this is why I'm bringing this issue up. So maybe before spending all of the money and having the study done, maybe we can look back at some of the paperwork that is already in files, Mr. Mayor, somewhere.
I just want everyone at that table and the superintendent to take note that I'm not crazy. I told them the same thing.
You did.
I told them the same thing.
And
And
so
then
if
I
I'm-
called some people.
If I may,
Can I just say something before you
Oh,
go?
please,
Because it's kind of
please,
important. So I kept saying this to them. I'm shocked that there's so much unknown.
Maybe the city council.
You know how much money they put into that? You know what I got back is that we know so little because all we were doing was trying to make it a parking lot.
Right.
So the amount of, we did do that, just to be clear, we did make sure that we did all the archives that we had in City Hall, all the planning board, zoning board. We had June Black as the economic development director for a little while, so she went and got congressional information for us. She put a nice packet together for the architects. And yet and still, there was so much unknown. And in that spot when we want to do the addition, you know, the hope was that it wasn't, the closer you were to the building, that the less there was going to be. But I wasn't scared of it until they got scared of it. You know, their concern caused my concern, and then the number grew. So I'll say that. But I will tell you, the superintendent's idea was the idea that you put forward, which is, hey, let's get information on both tracks so we don't, so we're not down one field and not the other.
I agree, and I do think it would be worth doing the phase two.
So if you want me to elaborate, we think we have all the information from, because that is the city's land, that it will be turned over from the Aerojet Corporation. We've been in contact with their their LSP, and the discussion's been going on, and the team did get together to talk about that. The mayor's exactly right. Everybody is exactly on the same page. Stay away from the gateway site. You know, it may
Where the
be,
proposed new,
it may be a bit unfortunate that the whole thing is kind of listed together, you know, but they did not drill and have testing wells in the area that we are concerned about, so the team just can't tell you what the risk is.
We can get money from Mass Dev to pay for a phase two. If the cost of the phase two.
It is not about the cost.
All right.
This is, the number has to go back down to 140. And then still, we're gonna be stretched. You know? And not to like, just, because I always tell people when I got money problems, I say, we gotta build 2 schools. But now I gotta tell you the reverse. I just settled a contract with the firefighters, and I still gotta settle a contract with the patrolmen, and that's not like a union of 5 or 6 people. And so, the same is true. I have staved off a lot of people by saying we gotta build these schools, but the reality is now also, we can't get ahead of our skis on this one set of assets.
Well, if we're looking to acquire the stone mill for the school, and if we looked at the Oliver School and the area that it's located in, and we already discussed this at the last meeting about the buildings, the adjacent buildings that are next to it, that could probably become part of the Oliver School site. And I know one of the buildings is the Senior Citizens Center. Well, no, if we're looking at the stone mill and the city is still willing to pursue that, that could be an option to look at that building being placed in that location and then taking all of that area for the Oliver School. It's just a thought, and I know that it might be far-fetched, but I'm always willing to look at different options, so I just throw it out there.
I don't, yeah, again, I think that people, when we talked about the stone mill, said that that was far-fetched. So I don't think the far-fetchedness of it is the issue. We did talk about, with all its problems, the idea of the acquisition of some properties next door, really to no avail. The parcels that are easy to get to are not going to make the difference, and the ones that are hard to get to are historical churches that people go and practice their faith in today. And so I think it makes the how do you grow the footprint bigger without all these other issues? The beauty of the stone mill was it was one site, one owner, one building, boom, and I think we got there because we were looking for how do we solve the swing space problem, which we will now inherit. We still don't have an answer for that yet. Partially because the St. Mary's thing, but I think it's going to be bigger than that. But I think for the moment, just so that I manage expectations, because we told the SBA, we're looking at 3 sites, which was a brand-new building on the parking lot, the redevelopment of the stone mill, and the redevelopment of the Oliver Partnership School in the location it is now. Those are the 3 choices we have. If we change those things, I think we're gonna have to, it's basically like starting from square one with MSBA. Do I got that wrong? And that's not just because I'm scared of Martha.
Can I, just to clarify though, I mean, couldn't Julia's idea be framed as I mean, it's an expansion of the current site, right? We're just moving a little further down the road, but the fact that we would actually be adding parcels to the thing is what would throw it off. Like so Julia's idea is that what we have said is that if we're looking at the current Oliver School site, right, there are some parcels that are accessible to us in various ways that we could acquire to become part of the expansion, or that the city might already have possession of, and there's others that we would need to acquire, right? And we've identified just a smaller footprint of those, and Julia is saying, take a look at the rest of, not the whole rest of the block, but move the line further down the block. Does that make it a whole new thing?
So I'd have you, I apologize, these were not in your package. Yep, so, yeah, so that is owned by the city right there, this small parcel. And then there's, the footprint of the building basically follows that H pattern. So we were also taking advantage of the small parking lot to the west. So that was what we currently have been told is available to us, is under city control.
If you look at the rest of the map, and I'm sorry that not everybody can see this, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4 residential buildings between the last lot we own and the senior center, along with 2 in the back. And the only legitimate thing would be can we just drop it on top of the senior center? I mean, we're going to, that's a big parcel.
Well, it's just an idea, or for something to look at if we have to go back to the Oliver School site and look at ways that we can maybe expand the number of students, because the city owns also the old educational center there.
It's a big site.
And there are 2 buildings there that
Right.
could be acquired. So there's only one main concern there. It's one of the churches that is in the middle between the 2 sites. But I'm just saying, I'm just throwing this out there for something to look at, because the building committee might not have looked at that, especially because you concentrated just on the Oliver School and the areas that are owned by the city. But if we needed to do something like that by acquiring these buildings next to it, it might be, we might be able to get away with get the 1,000 students that we're looking to have in this facility, if we had to stay away from the stone mill.
Right. I think that would bring music to the superintendent's ears. Right?
Yes, thank you.
I do want to say, just a really quick aside, our Swampscott High School has a senior center that was built as part of that high school, helped to secure the vote. It was a.
For the record, they did not have one before. They didn't blow one up to make it. Yeah, they didn't have one before.
Yeah, and the real point was that the mixing of generations in that environment is quite special.
Why not? That'd be really cool.
We'll take it.
And then you could finally tear down that little house and find a good home for the adult.
That's a historic center, by the way. So.
Yep.
Anyhow, I think part of the thing that is really important is that you see the complexity of this matter, and we're toiling with it, and no rash decisions, even if I wanted to push for one tonight, will be made.
All right, any more questions or comments? Great, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Pink and
having
SMMA. So we're going to tee up the budget overview process. I'll ask Maciel Jordan, our CFO, to join us at the table. I think the clicker can remain over there, Alex. So I'll direct you to,
I just want to say on this, just given that we've got a lot going tonight, like this is, this is to get an overview of the process that we are about to embark on, not the substance of the budget.
correct.
And I'm also going to ask LPS to recognize that they're moving us through the substance of the process, not, they're going to give us an overview of the process, not the substance of the budget here, and to be careful about time.
Man, I was going to figure out how many janitors in this building. Damn.
So I'll direct you to your materials in your Google Forms, and this is titled Proposed Budget, but it's Budget Overview. This first slide is just a summary of how this is getting developed, and as we've talked about in last year, this is really a forecasting of the FY21 budget. It's a collaboration with the central office leaders, principals, of course, and you all. And then this guidance of the budget guidelines that are also in your materials, so I'd like to bring your attention to the proposed budget guidelines. If you look at those, we've bucketed in we have three big buckets in terms of what we are thinking of our priorities. One is student achievement, and these are directly in line with my superintendent goals. You will also note that these are the goals that we've asked schools to plan around. The second one is under support services, and then the third one is under engagement. Maciel, can you forward the next one's good. So I'll direct you to the plan, let's see here, to the document that says FY21 School Planning Meeting Agenda. These budget meetings, and we've now calling them school planning meetings from the feedback that we got last year, will start right after the break and will end the first week in March. The document titled School Planning Meeting Agenda is what each school is asked to provide us as we build school-based budgets in order to build the district-wide budget. You'll see that in this agenda, we've asked schools to provide us for one student learning goal, a professional practice goal, and a school improvement goal, again, aligned to these three budget priorities. We, of course, have to review their staffing composition, their academic enrichment services, and anything else that school leaders have questions about, ideas about, given their autonomies. We're going to be meeting with each school leader. They're going to be bringing a +1 in close collaboration with their TLTs. We ask all our school leaders that they bring each proposal, including the school operational plan, designed in collaboration with their TLTs. And this slide also highlights the budget hearings that will also include Student Opportunity Act. I will talk about that briefly, but just note that we have included 2 additional March dates, that's March the 10th and March the 31st, given the April 1st deadline of the Student Opportunity Act. And then, of course, we have the March 11th regular scheduled meeting. We are going to ask for a vote on March the 31st for the Student Opportunity Act in this budget hearing. So here again is the highlight overview of what we're asking schools to bring. It is in better detail in the agenda that we've given you. It's also in the document titled Introduction to School Planning that all schools received in detail of what we're asking each school to bring in those meetings. In the next slide, we have funding sources. This is the 2 big sources that we have for our local is the state and federal grants. So Lawrence received grants either through the formula based on the population, and those are entitlement grants, Title I, II, III. And then we also have, of course, Chapter 70. So this is the next slide. I'm going to ask Maciel to jump in on this one in terms of how the state determines our aid.
Chapter 78 formula defines and calculates each community's foundation budget, which is the adequate funding level for each district based off specific grades, programs, and the demographic characteristics of its students. It determines an equitable local contribution, or how much of that foundation budget should be paid for by each city and town's property tax based upon the relative wealth of the community. And the remainder of the funding comes from Chapter 70 state aid. The net school spending formula is local contribution plus state aid, which then equals the minimum amount each district has to spend in order to comply with state law. This next slide gives you a little bit of a history on how much we've received in previous years. But for fiscal 21, we are set to receive $221.7 million in Chapter 70 aid, which makes up 95% of our overall net school spending requirement. The city's minimum contribution is supposed to be 11.5. This next slide is going to detail the full net school spending calculation. We are required to spend by the governor's budget $233.3 million. Of that, we have to take out the $28 million of qualifying city costs, which leaves our appropriation to be $205.2 million with additional money from the city to support transportation, adult education, and any building leases we have for over 3 years. So the total will receive appropriation, hopefully will be the $216 million. And that,
Sorry, now I'm confused. I was totally with you up until this point.
Sure.
So what's the difference between, what's the 233 versus the 216?
Sure. So I'll take you back one slide. So the 233 is the total between the 221.7 and the 11.5 from the city. And then the following slide is giving you a breakdown of that. Oh, I apologize. So I believe the breakdown you have in front of you is a little bit more legible than the one that's currently up on the screen. Fortunately, there was an alignment issue.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I understand from the slide before this how we're getting to 233 with the 221 in Chapter 78 and 11 from the city. But then I don't understand which number is the school budget. It's the 216 number or the 233 number? We're getting 233, but we only need 216?
No. So the 233 is what we're required to spend.
Okay.
And of that 233, the city is allowed to charge qualifying costs against that.
Okay.
And that's what the $28 million is. That brings us down to the 205.
Down to the 205.
But then there's also costs pertaining to
I
us that
see.
the city covers.
Okay.
So they then give us back the 9.2 for transportation, the 1.3 for adult education,
Okay.
and 300,000 for leases.
Thank you.
Sure. And then this slide is just to give a bit of an overview on the Student Opportunity Act, which has made an unprecedented $1.5 billion investment into the Massachusetts public education, ensuring the public schools have adequate resources to provide high-quality education to the students across the state, regardless of zip code or income level. All districts are required to submit a three-year evidence-based plan for the commissioner's approval, outlining how we will spend their funding to support student subgroups. The plan is due on April 1st. The city of Lawrence will see an increase of $21.7 million in their Chapter 70 money.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here and I'll share with you with respect to process. The Student Opportunity Act does have very specific guidelines for us that will include your input and of course your vote before we submit it for the April 1st deadline. So today the leadership team spent quite a bit of time designing an internal process based on our budget priorities, internal goals, and guidance from the state based on criteria that they have allowed us to think about these monies. So here, this is just hot off the presses. What I can say to you is that we've been very thoughtful about those guidelines, our priorities, and have rebucketed all of them to ensure that there's coherence with school-based, district-based, and then this opportunity for additional funding. What you have in front of you is our design for involving stakeholder input. These are all organic opportunities that are happening right now. So each member of our team will be able to go in front of the different stakeholders. We're designing a protocol that we will all have so that each stakeholder group has a reaction, can give us feedback, additional comments on the draft of the proposal. You will also have the opportunity to have a reaction to that. And again, we've included all of the ongoing, what I call organic groups and meetings that we're having in the next few months. It's a quite aggressive timeline. We feel confident that we can get this in front of all these groups right now and then bring it back to you all for feedback and approval. I'll take questions about Student Opportunity Act. I know that people in the district have been asking us a lot of questions about that, so wondering what questions you all have.
I don't have any questions about it. This is incredibly helpful because we know that more money is coming into the district, and I find it sometimes harder to spend money when you have it than when you don't have it. And so because everybody thinks you're getting, $1 billion, engaging all these groups specifically, I see that the partnership is in here, the parents, and I think that that's super, super helpful because then we don't have to answer those questions. They can get it straight from the horse's mouth. So I just want to thank you for doing that. This is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I don't have a question so much as a comment, which is just to say that, just to let people know that we have also had conversations about how we're integrating some of the stakeholder feedback for the Student Opportunity Act with the stakeholder feedback for the turnaround plan and process, because we felt like those are both incredibly important, but we didn't want to survey and focus group people to death. And so I feel good about how that is coming together and that we're going to be able to integrate some of that process. So that is good.
Great. So I'll follow on along in this presentation. I think this is back to how the schools are funded and the reminder that our...
Cynthia, I'm sorry, I just want to say
Yeah, of
one more
course.
thing about that, which is also that I know there are members of this committee are also, so Noemi and Pat and I are on the turnaround plan subcommittee, and so even in addition to this robust list, we are doing some additional outreach to other parent groups and community groups so that we'll be gathering even more feedback to feed into this process. And I just wanted to make that clear too.
Yeah, so the leadership team give this a lot of thinking in terms of including those other two process. It's very complex. And even as we were thinking out loud and have feel very intimately know this process, it felt complicated. So we definitely want to explore additional options, and we're happy to give you the protocol and the design that we are hoping to establish with all of those stakeholder groups. And it's complicated because people have to have a reaction to the current proposal that we have, so we're happy to discuss that with you all. If the more the merrier.
Thank you.
So this is just a reminder that our schools have budget autonomy. And what you will see when we come to you with the budget book and proposed overall budget is that difference, because you will see FTEs that look very different given the budget autonomies. Staffing, of course, we provide the funding that is to cover the cost of salary and contract. So these are all contractual obligations that our schools have, though they have been level funded for that. And then, of course, non-salary budgets that we provided level funding for those accounts as well. So what is funded in the request we will bring later to you, but what you're going to be seeing is all the existing positions, the level funding for instructional and operationals, and then again, any of the cost escalations that we expect from contractual obligations. This last one is the highlight again of what we're proposing your budget highlights, budget priorities to be, but they're in greater detail in one of your documents. So again, it's student achievement, support services, and engagement.
I have a quick question. So, I want to make sure I ask this question right. The work product, are we going to have one budget book, or are we going to have a budget book made in the style and form that we had last year? Or are we expecting one budget book for that and another budget book for the student, the SOA?
The SOA will be rolled into the budget book. So one challenge with the budget book that we anticipate is that the budget book, as a reminder, was developed by the city side, which means that they had a different infrastructure and software that we do not have. So we're going to do our best to mimic that same format, but that's going to be created internally by LPS.
Again, just so that we don't run into the same problem from last year is, I think that a draft of not real data, but fake mocked up data on what a school might look like, because some of the fundamentals in the book that we have are not just line item information, but prior year line item information at the personnel level, but also at the services level and the equipment level. All that stuff has, what we pay for lights at the police department last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and how much we're proposing to pay for it this year. So those are things. If we could see a draft of the template, I don't want to pretend to know that you guys have figured out how you're going to spend it. That will help progress the conversation, so that we don't show up on day one to do the business of the book and then find there's stuff missing from the book. And if there's a structural issue, hey, Dan, we just don't have that data, or the data doesn't fit in this right way, how can we accommodate it? And I think you guys were great last year. You accommodated every request for data that we wanted. But the fact that we waited the fact that we're doing it in the last minute gives me concern. So if we could get the template of what it might look like, that would be very helpful.
Do you want to speak to the template, or you just want me to talk about it?
No, I think that's a reasonable request, so I don't have an issue with that. Sorry.
Thank you.
So, can I have a clarifying question? So, we're getting 21 million extra dollars, but we're level funding certain things. Like, I know we're escalating for other things that we have to contractually. So, is it that that's the starting point, and then schools are going to have additional funding that they're going to spend. I think these three priorities are exactly the right ones, because we've all talked about the need for more special ed support and English learner support and definitely family engagement. But can you just explain how that is, I'm
Yeah.
something missing for me, and
Sure, so that is part of the challenge that we have now, because the SOA requires a different action plan, if you would, although it gets rolled up. And you will end up seeing that these are school-based funding and allocations, and it requires a separate plan. So what we've done to sort of differentiate for all of you, for all of us internally, and for the schools, is to level fund schools, go through this plan, and then allocate accordingly, given the priorities. So it may be that at the Leahy, part of those priorities is an additional 3 FTEs for mental health or behavior. I don't know, I'm making this up.
Yep.
And then that gets rolled up into the Leahy. But it's not until we design this current plan based on the priorities and the guidelines that we can do that. So we have to go through the process first.
Okay, makes
The
sense.
schools were also asking the same question.
Okay.
So you have to report that to the state is asking for a specific action plan with this extra money.
That's exactly right. April 1st is the deadline.
Other questions? Okay. I just want to, for an abundance of clarity, just state very clearly right now that with this April 1st deadline in mind, we will have a budget meeting on Tuesday, March 10th, the regular LAE meeting on Wednesday, March 11th, and a budget meeting on Tuesday, March 31st. The March 31st will then have a special meeting of the LAE to vote on what has to be sent to DESI for the April 1st deadline.
That's the 31st, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Isn't that cutting it too close if it's the 31st and the next day is the deadline?
It's cutting it real close, and I would just keep in mind here that we sort of received the directive from the state on this last week. And we're trying to find enough time here to be able to have the budget process moving and make some type of informed decision on SOA. Mr. Mayor.
Can you run the dates again?
So Tuesday, March 10th will be a budget hearing. And Tuesday, March 31st will be a budget hearing, followed by a special meeting of the LAE to take under consideration the SOA plan that has to be submitted to DESI.
And we also have an LAE meeting on the 11th.
Yes.
Are we going to be voting on the full budget and just the SOA money?
So, sorry, I'd like to clarify that the 2 additional meetings are specific budget hearings with respect to the SOA.
Right.
So that's the 10 and the 13, and the 31st.
All right.
Yes, because on the 10th, we hope to outline for you everything we've learned. If there's further discussion on the 12th, followed by a vote, we hope on the 31st, and for us to submit it on time. It's a really tight deadline.
Based on that, Superintendent, is it possible for us to get the budget information prior to the 10th, as the mayor requested, or are we going to get that at that meeting? On the 10th?
So by the 10th, we will be having a draft of the SOA action plan,
And
which
that-
is specific, which is specific to the 21 million.
The balance of the budget, the 200 some odd million, that is going to be gone through the regular process.
It's in line with that, but yes, it's going to require an additional meeting for you all to, but it should fold up very,
The only thing that we'll add, I think, to we're gonna have to look at what we spent last year. I think that's the only thing we can do is look at what we spent last year and then say, oh, they're gonna add to those places in those budget. Last year's budget book will be informative on that, in that front, because you can just say,
On that line, then, we should have a column for the amount that was budgeted for each item and the amount that was actually spent. That way we can compare with, what will be presented for the year 21, I guess, for the fiscal.
Yeah, so what we'll bring to you is how, the proposed plan for how to spend the additional funding.
All right, you want to move on to calendar?
Yep, so next I wanted to highlight the proposed student and family calendar. This format is exactly the same as the one that we brought to you last year. It has the same start time. The structure is nearly identical. The only difference that you will note here is the additional half day, which is during the December break, the 20, where is it? 20, thank you. The 23rd becomes a half day, given how the holidays fall. And then you'll see pretty much an identical calendar that we proposed last year. This calendar got feedback from our principals. Of course, central office leaders built it with an equity lens, and we also collaborated and got feedback from LTU leadership. So I'll take any questions that you have about the calendar as well.
any issues from the MOAs? What was it? The
EMOs.
EMOs. Sorry.
Like the alphabet soup letters.
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
That's all right. EMOs. No, none. I've spoken to one of the school leaders, both school leaders actually from one of our EMOs, and the TLT along with administration have
Now you're
proposed-
just making them up.
the teacher leadership teams
Okay.
and administration are bringing forth proposals that, in my just thinking through with the school leaders, seem incredibly reasonable.
Great.
So we don't anticipate any challenges.
Any other questions on the calendar?
Can we celebrate Mayor Rivera's birthday on the 23rd? He's getting concerned about that, so I figured I'd bring it up.
It's my 50th birthday, that new half day.
Oh,
So you guys are all invited to
thank you.
cry with me at a place of future, so, thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that
Oh
is
my
before us now and will be up for a vote at the next meeting, the calendar. All right, great. Superintendent, any other additions on your report or anything I'm missing?
You know, I just wanted to circle back on the green light for the JRTC trip to England. I said I had it in my notes. So the purpose of that was the group got invited to participate in the Cadets Across Atlantic, which is an educational and cultural trip to England. And those dates are March the 19th through the 26th.
Great. Okay, so moving to report of the chair, and we're going to cover turnaround plan and earned autonomy update. At this time, if you go into your docs under earned autonomy, you'll see JSC LAE overview deck. And that's where we'll start. Erica, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing a seat up here, and I'll, if Erica's still here. And Erica, I'm just going to have you up there. We're going to bring the consultants up one at a time, but it will just be good to have you there for questions that are more appropriate for DESI rather than the consultants. And I'll take the clicker from you for now. Erica Alvarez-Warner is from DESE. Many of you on the board have met Lauren Wu. Lauren is on maternity leave, and Erica has filled in for Lauren for all of this work and a whole bunch of other work, and has just been great on sort of filling in on the fly, and we appreciate that. We're going to have 2 consultants for each process come up, but I'm going to do a quick overview first. I just want Erica here, just so you understand, sort of natural when we talk about turnaround in particular, that some of the questions you may be asking are most appropriately addressed to DESE. And Erica will be here to answer those, or at least take those questions back and get us clarification. So I've got Erica here to answer questions on those ends. I'm going to bring the consultants up momentarily. But I want to start with this overview deck. So we have these 2 major initiatives that we are undertaking as a board, and that we will hopefully be voting on in June. So one is the Earned Autonomy Framework, and the other is Turnaround Plan Renewal. And we've been giving you sort of brief updates at every meeting this year, but now we're in that stage where the consultants have been engaged, the work has actively begun, and I want to just make sure that we all have a real clear understanding of exactly what's going on. So just for starters, for quick definition on what each process does, the turnaround plan, it's the district's school improvement strategy, as you all know. We, as a board, voted for renewal of the current plan, but with a couple of conditions that obviously there would be some modifications made, and that there would be a robust community engagement process. And that's the turnaround plan. The Earned Autonomy Framework may be a little bit less known here. So just to be really clear on what our Earned Autonomy Framework is, it's a system by which we will give a rating to each school individually each year. And the idea here, though, is that the community establishes the criteria by which we rate the schools, so that it goes beyond the current state criteria. So we can't be in contradiction to the state and federal requirements around rating schools, and that goes most particularly to MCAS, but Lawrence can, as a community, establish other criteria by which they wish to rate their schools and give their own rating. And that's what the Earned Autonomy Framework here is. And the additional piece on it is that we will then take these ratings and use them to determine the level of autonomy the schools will get. And that's sort of the next generation of the open architecture system that Lawrence has been working under for over 5 years now. So within this, we established a joint steering committee on turnaround and earned autonomy. And why did we do that? Well, because you got these 2 big processes going on. They both involve stakeholder engagement, and we want to make sure that the processes are not duplicative, and also that they are aligned. And the Joint Steering Committee really exists to oversee that and to give guidance and feedback on both processes. So what we tried to do with the Joint Steering Committee was take each, and I mean this in the broadest possible definition, like each broad category for major stakeholders in Lawrence, and make sure that they were represented here. So we have the superintendent and myself from the LAE and LPS perspective, Kim Berry from the Lawrence Teachers Union, Lane Glenn from Northern Essex, and I want to just be clear on that. That is obviously, we know all the great work Northern Essex does, but that is to serve in the institutional role as a voice for institutional stakeholders, not just Northern Essex. Kevin Quaselbosch from Spark Academy is a principal, and we hope will bring that voice of principals to the work of the steering committee. Charitza Rizzo is a parent and a voice of Lawrence parents on the steering committee. And then Kinnan Foley, also from LPS, serving on the joint steering committee. So when you think about earned autonomy, and this is specifically just earned autonomy, we want to think about it, you know, again, as I said, sort of this rating for schools, but again, if there's just sort of one take-home point, I'm not going to just read these slides verbatim, it's just that this way that we rate these schools should be defined by the community. And once you've established the community priorities to rate these schools, you get the ratings on a regular basis, and hopefully they are used to drive decision-making, because schools and the broader school community can see how they're doing in meeting the community's criteria. And hopefully it, again, will communicate progress. And I think one of the things we hope with this is that it not sort of maybe take on a lot of the connotations that the state framework has taken on, you know, for good, bad, and fair or unfair, that so much what the states has taken on just goes to MCAS scores and a judgment based on that. And there is other criteria, obviously, but that it has been defined in that way and viewed that way by people. This should be a process that's about communicating progress and community-established criteria and values, and hopefully seeing that reflected in our schools. With that, we have a whole bunch of moving pieces here on both earned autonomy and turnaround. I will just quickly say, because the consultants are going to get into the details of what earned autonomy is going to do, and the consultants are going to get into the details of what turnaround is going to do. And I just want to walk you through quickly sort of all these moving pieces. So LAE here is trying to coordinate and align these efforts. We've got two consultants. We have Great Schools, and they are the consultant to the turnaround plan. And we have CPRL from Columbia University. I am going to totally mess this up. The Center for Public Research and Leadership, CPRL. And they are based at Columbia. And they are working on the earned autonomy framework. So again, we've got this joint committee that's trying to make sure both are aligned. We have a consultant for each process. Here's your general timeline. We have approved the vendors. They are going to begin and have already begun engaging stakeholders to get feedback. That will run through March. At that point, a draft turnaround plan and a draft version of the earned autonomy framework will be established, two separate drafts that will be mostly done in April, and then shared toward the end of April and into May, and we'll look to get feedback on those and ultimately try to head toward a final vote of the LAE in June. And I want to be clear, that's two votes. There will be a vote on turnaround renewal. There will be a vote on the earned autonomy framework. So again, all the pieces that are going to be moving while this goes on. You've got DESE, you've got the LAE, you've got LPS, you have the Joint Steering Committee, you've got CPRL, Great Schools, and Empower Schools, who have been under a grant providing a lot of the documentation to the board on numerous things we've worked on since the LAE has been established, and I have asked them to help support specifically the work on earned autonomy at the board level. And just to, make it even more clear here, or unclear, but I think I'm going to clarify it with the last slide. LAE is then broken into two subcommittees here. We have an earned autonomy subcommittee, and we have a turnaround renewal subcommittee. And I'm not going to ask you if you know which subcommittee you're on, because you already do know which subcommittee you're on. I'll ask our usual trivia question. Can anyone name the one member of LAE who's on both subcommittees? It's Pat Mariano. Okay. So, if you only take one thing from my brilliant presentation, I hope it is this slide right here, because this is what's going on. So, the straight line arrows are direct reporting in a official sense. The broken line arrows are for consultation. In the middle, you have really what we could put in any chart around governance of the district. You've got DESE at the top, LAE as the oversight board, and then the Lawrence Public Schools. On the right, you've got Earned Autonomy Framework, Turnaround Plan on the left, and I would start at the bottom. Bottom right, Earned Autonomy, you've got CPRL, that's the consultant for Earned Autonomy. They're going to do the work of getting the feedback from the community and then drafting and preparing the plan. On the left, you've got the Great Schools Partnership. They are going to do the work of getting feedback from the community and then drafting the renewal plan. And what you see in there is they report directly to DESE, because DESE is where the contracts for their services originate. But they should, at all points of doing their work, be consulting with LPS, the Joint Steering Committee, which has all those stakeholder groups represented, and the subcommittees of the LAE. That makes sense? And then if you look, as you think about the product being prepared, it will obviously be reviewed by the Joint Steering Committee. There's no official vote there, but I would say I think we would be very hard-pressed to send turnaround renewal and earned autonomy framework to the LAE subcommittees without the Joint Steering Committees signing off on them. Those plans would then go to the subcommittees. The subcommittees would review and then make a recommendation to the LAE board. And at that point, the LAE board would be voting on each. Questions on this overview, and I just want you to bear in mind, I'm going to bring each consultant up to give a presentation on their respective aspects of the process, and that's where I think substantive questions on the process can go. But anything on this sort of broad overview, what this looks like, what we're doing, what the time frame is. Nope. Okay, great. So I think we'll go with turnaround. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. I know I see that this plan is at a really basic level still, and it's still like planning. And I might be speaking from my point of view of ignorance, because I'm not too involved in this yet. But what do you think is, because we have talked about this autonomy plan from the perspective of how the community will be impacted and how the overall school system will be impacted, but how do you think students will be impacted by this?
So, an excellent question. I can tell you when these two groups come up, they can speak to the degree to which they are going to engage students for their opinions. And Joseph, you have just been appointed to the Joint Steering Committee as the student representative. And I appreciate the point. It's an excellent point.
Thank you.
You just added 5 meetings to your calendar between now and June, but they will be worthwhile meetings. They happen during the school day, so you're going to have to be excused from class, come down to the superintendent's office and give us your vantage point on the student voice here, okay? Thank you, I really appreciate the question. Anything else on overview there? Okay.
You are allowed to say no to him, you know.
And in fact, if you don't say no to me, you will break a long line of Lawrence residents on this board. So, all right, so with that said, we'll do turnaround first. If Great Schools wants to come up, that would be terrific. If you can introduce yourself and get right to it, that's great.
All right. Does this stay on, or do I have to hold it?
It's
Okay.
on. Yep, you're
All
good.
right. My name is Mo Nunez. I work for Great Schools Partnership. I'm a senior associate there. We're located in Portland, Maine, and I am part of the Lawrence Turnaround Plan along with my partner, Michelle Milstein, who could not be here this evening. So the first visual that we have up on the slide deck here is what we sort of put together to encapsulate our timeline as we understand it. And it's broken down into 3 sections. So it'd be map and coordinate, which would take place between January and mid-February, January being when we found out about the program and were brought on board. Listen and gather feedback, February, March, that's where we are currently. And synthesize and theme, which we're going to undertake in April. Underneath each of those, you can see that we've put together activities that are the central activities for each of the phases. We are about to move into the listen and gather feedback phase, beginning in 2 weeks, or in a week and a half. And then from there, we will sit with the data, aggregate it, and theme it back out according to the headings and themes already present in the turnaround plan itself, the original turnaround plan. Direct you to the stakeholder engagement plan. There's another document that has a stakeholders map in it. I printed those out for y'all. There is a version in your docs folder, but this is a color-coded version that I put in front of you. And what I want to highlight is the green sections are stakeholder groups that we've already established meetings with. Dates have been set, locations have been determined. The yellow stakeholders in your map are stakeholders that we've reached out to. We have tentative plans with them. And it's either they're waiting to hear from us or we're waiting to hear from them, but those are near completion. And then the last is Rad Stakeholder Groups, are groups that we're still hoping to set up meetings with, focus groups, surveys, given the time, whatever is appropriate at that point. So I'll walk us really quickly through the stakeholders. We have families, community members, and community organizations, and we broke those down into specific family categories that we felt were representative of the Lawrence School District. So for instance, we have families of preschoolers, family of middle schoolers, and families of special education students. We've sort of separated those out as different stakeholder groups. So we really didn't want to approach this with the idea that all parents are the same or a monolith in terms of their feedback for their kids and their schools. With the students, we wanted to focus on K-8. We really felt that reaching out to alumni was essential as well, sort of give us a look back, with the hindsight is 20/20, if you will. be able to sort of share some of their insights to see if it builds on what we're going to do next. And then lastly, we thought it was really important to also target SPED and ELL students as well, be able to sort of get their take on accessibility and opportunity and access. In terms of educators, we split those up by grade bands. So we have elementary students, middle school students, SPED students, EL students, educators. And then we split those up into departments. So we have an EL department, a SPED department, student support, and student services. And we were hoping to get each of those groups, sit them down and sort of go through the same process that we are going to go through with parents. As you can see, currently, there's only one group that we're targeting that we haven't had a chance to finalize what that would look like when we sit down with them. But we do have in your map the activities, the methods of engagement, the timelines, and our current needs as we understand them. Now, the needs category, which is to your far right hand, we will continue to fill as we get closer to the date of the events. So I'll just give you a moment to look that over.
I'd also just ask here, Jess, I don't know if you want to chime in as the member of the turnaround subcommittee, and I know you've been doing a lot of work around how this stakeholder engagement is going to look, and if you have thoughts at this juncture or anything else to add to what you're seeing right now.
I don't actually have much to add. I mean, we've been in a lot of contact with Mo and Michelle and have been kind of shaping this together, and I'm really happy with the way it's shaping up. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for different members of the school community and the larger community to give feedback and input, and there are going to be conversations that will have translation and childcare and all the supports that we need for people to really participate, and we're going to just try and connect with as wide a group as possible. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, on the last page there, you see that we added business owners and city council state delegates as separate stakeholder groups. That's on our wish list. If time permits, we'll be definitely sitting down with those groups in whatever capacity they present to us. And then directly underneath, there's still the groups that we're hoping to create direct contact with and sort of share this with them and kind of get some insight from their perspectives. So if there are no questions go ahead,
I do want to add one thing that we just also thought it was important that that Great Schools Partnership talked with the elected school committee as well, and Pat is going to serve as the connection to them and setting that up.
We just established that. Thank you, Jeff. If there are no questions, I'd move on to the third document I presented. Yep. So there's a document, the title of it is Summary of Turnaround Plan Main Themes. And that's just was given to you right at the start of this meeting. Michelle and I both come from research backgrounds, so we decided that in the engagement process, when we're with partners, with stakeholders, that we take a direct and indirect approach to gathering data. So if you look down to the students group right at the top of the stakeholders group, directly when we're with them, we'll be focusing on the topics of rigor, themes, rigor, social emotional supports, and enrichment opportunities. But during those conversations, one of us will be listening and sort of, getting information on increased quality instructional time, great staff, great leaders, and EL/SPED support. These are all in the turnaround plan as goals and focus points. Knowing that we have a limited time, we're going to be crafting questions that will directly ask about rigor, but also be designed to give us feedback on great staff, great leaders, for instance. And so if you go through each section, students, teachers, principals, families, and community, those are the ones we've already set up. Those are ones that we have in the pipeline and are going to be doing. And then for each of those groups, you'll see we once again broke it down to directly when we're together. The questions will be pointedly about rigor, for instance, but through the data analysis portion of our work, which would be in the April part of our plan, which is the little funnel crushing the food there, we'll also be getting the indirect information that we heard as well. We have several of the sessions are set up so that CPRL and GPS will be on site together. And during those sessions, we will be also doing indirect data gathering when CPRL is in front and vice versa. So that's a great opportunity as well for us, sort of to maximize our reach in a short amount of time. With that, that's the basic overview of the plan. So I'll take questions if I can.
So this, again, we thank you, Mo, but so this is for the turnaround plan, development of the turnaround plan. So any questions relative to this? And obviously, to be abundantly clear, like at all of our meetings leading up to June, we will review where we are, give you updates and so on, and take questions. But at this point, any questions relative to turnaround plan renewal? Okay, all right, thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Great, yep, thanks, Erica, appreciate it.
They ain't all gonna be this easy.
And we'll bring CPRL up on earned autonomy. Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you all for joining us, or excuse me, inviting us to be here tonight. We are really excited to be working with the entire Lawrence community on this project. My name is Maddie Sims, and I am a project director at CPRL, and I'm joined this evening by two of my project associates, Gabrielle and Julia. So I'll turn and see if this works. Oh, great. So on slide 2, you see just a quick agenda to let you know what we'll be walking you through this evening. I'm going to start with a brief introduction to CPRL and evolutionary learning, which is really the theory that really guides all of the work that we do on behalf of our clients. I'll then move into the Earned Autonomy Framework overview. I'll try not to repeat too much of the helpful introduction that John already provided all of you, and then I'm eager to turn it over for any questions that any of you all have for us. Great, so what is CPRL? What is our mission? We really have a dual mission, and that is to revitalize PK through 12 education and reinvent professional education. What does that mean? Oh, this is going a little nuts. Sorry about that. Okay. Seems to be skipping. Sorry about that. Okay. So here's a little bit more about our goals and approach generally, and what this slide is getting at is what our sort of dual mission and logo really means. And what it is that we bring together talented graduate students from a variety of programs. We immerse them in the study of PK through 12 educational improvement, and then we launch them into the field to serve organizations and districts such as Lawrence that are really involved in transformative projects that we feel are really going to have a direct impact on the students. I'm going to skip over the next two slides, but I just wanted to mention that on slides 6 and 7, in case you all are interested after the meeting, there is a overview of some of the representative projects that we've done on behalf of other clients, in case you're interested to learn a bit more about the type of work we do and the experience that we're bringing to this project. I do want to spend a moment on evolutionary learning. So what is evolutionary learning? It's a disciplined way to improve by learning rapidly from the carefully observed experiences of the people closest to the problem to be solved. And I think we're all really energized that there seems to be this real shared commitment amongst members of the LAE board, members of the district, other organizations that are working on behalf of Lawrence to really engaging closely with the community. And I think that that's incredibly exciting because I think those are the times when the work that's done is really impactful. With that, I'm going to turn our attention to the actual earned autonomy framework. So to begin this discussion, I want to sort of contextualize it a bit within the sort of background or brief history of where the district is, and this is something that all of you are very familiar with. It's something that my team is sort of over the past couple weeks and continuing to get ourselves up to speed on. And that's through both a combination of research and really helpful conversations with the superintendent as well as other members of the district. So under the open architecture plan thus far, Lawrence has made tremendous gains, and we've been reading about the gains that have been made in graduation rate, the gains that have been made in student achievement, and these are all sort of growth measures that are great for us to see and that we want to empower the district to continue building on going forward. We're also aware that these gains have not always been experienced equally by all students, and the framework that we're providing, it's our hope that it becomes really a diagnostic tool that the district can use to really build upon the gains that are already taking place. So going sort of onto the next slide where we really get to what is the need for this framework. So as I mentioned, that we are aiming to support the district as it continues to build on the gains that it's already experienced. And in order to do that, what we really need is a framework that supports localized decision making. Right now, the Lawrence, in making a lot of its important decisions, does utilize the DESE performance management framework, or excuse me, the DESE accountability system, and those metrics are incredibly important and provide a lot of important and useful, transparent information. But everyone also recognizes that at the district level, there's additional information that is not being captured there. That's information around school environment. That's how safe are students feeling in the building. It's things like, are students feeling supported by their teachers? Are they feeling supported by the support staff? And really that the idea behind the framework that we're building is to really create these school snapshots, is a phrase that we've used, so that people both within the district and the community can look at really a snapshot of how is a school doing. And it's not just going to tell you, oh, it's doing well in test scores, or oh, it's doing well in this one measure. It's really going to be a comprehensive assessment. So that brings us to really like what the actual framework is going to do. So it's really going to enable Lawrence to, as I mentioned, collect, analyze, and act upon the school level data needed to support decisions around autonomies, supports, and interventions. And what that means is that when the district is looking at schools and trying to decide whether certain schools have earned the right for additional autonomies in certain subject areas, whether there are schools that seem like they really are in need of certain additional supports, it's not going to have to be an informal ad hoc decision process. There's going to be a really sort of comprehensive data that is able to really tell a really compelling story. So that brings me to the overview of Project Milestones, or what I like to sort of call, how are we going to do that really large task that was listed on the last slide. So the first milestone is aligning on how the framework will guide decision-making related to school-level supports and autonomy. And that's where our conversations with many of the leaders within the district that are already taking place and continuing to take place are incredibly helpful and important, so that we can focus our resources in the most efficient way. The next item is engaging stakeholders to ensure that the framework incorporates localized and varied perspectives. And that is, again, something that we have already started taking place through the assistance of the central office staff to help with LPS facilitated engagement, as well as other conversations that we are continuing to set up. The next step will be, once we sort of gather all of those localized perspectives, we will be drafting a working theory to guide LPS in its assessment of school performance and associated decision-making. And that's really a crucial step, because without sort of a guiding philosophy or a set of guiding principles, it's hard to understand what it is exactly that you're measuring. Once we have that theory in place, we will be identifying metrics, data collection tools, weighting guidelines, and those are questions like, what percentage weight does this factor get? Is this weighted equally with another factor? And those are all, those decisions will be made based on a combination of a review of best practices across in use by other schools, as well as the types of feedback that we're receiving when we have those sort of in-person conversations and focus groups. We'll then be delivering a roadmap that provides an overview of the framework. And then finally, as was mentioned, we'll be revising that framework based on feedback, and then aiming to submit the framework for approval at the June 2020 LAE meeting. The next slide just has a proposed timeline. As you see, it's broken up pretty evenly. We're currently in the process of sort of both of the first blocks around aligning on the framework's use, as well as stakeholder engagement, are definitely in full swing. We'll be returning to Lawrence in, I believe, a couple weeks, I guess the first week of March, to run a series of focus groups, including a focus group has already been set up with teachers and support staff. We'll have one with families and community members, and the district is helping us to ensure that we have translation services available so that parents who don't speak English are also able to contribute their voices and opinions. And that kind of naturally leads me to the last slide before I turn it over to all of you for any questions. I wanted to take a minute to really talk about what we mean by robust stakeholder engagement, and I know that I am preaching to the choir, because everyone here has, throughout this evening, really been talking so much about this, but I do think it's important that we emphasize that we are interested in learning from people's localized expertise and their localized experience, and that's why we are hosting sort of such a wide array of focus groups, and really going to structure them in a way that ensures that sort of diverse voices, particularly those that have been historically underrepresented in sort of policy and educational decisions, are being heard. And then finally, the last point I'll make is that it's really important to us that we clearly communicate to the broader community how this framework will incorporate their voices and how it will work. And I think that, unlike some of the other sort of topics that arise in the school community, I think the idea of this earned autonomy framework can be a little bit opaque to people who aren't familiar with it. But at the end of the day, for us, it's really about empowering the district to make decisions that are informed. And I think that it allows the district to look at schools and have a way to target supports, target autonomy, target interventions, and it's really that diagnostic feature is what will make it hopefully a really helpful tool. I will stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
Questions on
Yeah.
earned autonomy framework? Mr. Mayor?
This might just be a very naive statement. It's actually, I guess, a point of pride, but also maybe my misunderstanding. The earned autonomy frameworks that we've been using, that was homegrown, right? This is not something that they adopted from some other community, right? Not what you're building out, but what we've been using.
Yeah, the open architecture system.
Open architecture, I meant to
yeah,
use the wrong word.
established that pretty unique to Lawrence.
So you guys have to learn that and try to figure out what the end goals was. So to that point, and that's not any shade to the current superintendent or the LAE board, but what's your interaction been with Jeff Riley on that? And
Sure.
the people who were around, because it wasn't just Jeff, it was Jeff and a whole group of people back then.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So at this stage, so far, we've been reviewing a lot of the documents that existed back from 2014 and whatnot, but it's definitely on sort of our list to do, is to sort of get in contact with those folks, and I think those would be really valuable conversations.
I mean, I think Frank McLaughlin, who was here, I used to call them the Men in Black. I don't know if there was Seth and another woman, what's the woman's name? Julie. Mike Keneally, who's with the Secretary's office. He's not the Secretary of Economic Development.
Yeah.
just
So-
because they grew it together. So I think that would be a good
So
perspective.
one thing I can say, though, that I just want to, because it's an excellent point from the mayor, is just that I know Commissioner Riley has stated that this movement to an earned autonomy framework is something that he views very favorably and sees as sort of the natural evolution for open architecture. But I will also just say, Mr. Mayor, I will work on creating an opportunity for CPROL to talk to the commissioner, Frank McLaughlin, Seth, Julie, and then would mention just presently LTU through Kim is serving on the steering committee.
Yeah, that was great.
But I will work to make sure that they have full context, not just from written documents, but getting to talk to all those folks.
Yeah, that
And
would
as
be
the
great.
mayor will tell you, it's always exciting to talk to Commissioner Riley.
We look forward to it.
Other questions on earned autonomy?
If I could just sort of make a point and maybe ask a question. Whereas open architecture is very unique and homegrown to Lawrence, I think this notion of performance management is not, in the sense of like,
Correct.
portfolio or whatever it is. So can you just talk a little bit about, like, have you all done work in other districts that use school-based autonomy to develop something like a performance-based, management system?
Sure. So CPROL has worked with a lot of districts as well as foundations that are involved in supporting portfolio strategies. Particularly, they've done work in New York and in a bunch of other cities. I think that one of the reasons that we are so excited about this project is that we're able to draw upon a lot of past deliverables that we've prepared and a lot of past client experiences. I think one of the interesting facets is that performance management frameworks can be used toward a lot of different end goals. They're all about, you want to measure a wide variety of factors, but sometimes they are intended to foster continuous improvement, for example. So I think one of the ways that we're going to really rely on a lot of these like stakeholder engagements is to help us sort of you start with kind of some basic framework, basic principles such as incorporation of leading and lagging indicators and things like that. And then we're going to use a lot of the individual conversations and district-specific research to make sure that it's a performance management framework that clearly allows Lawrence to make the decisions around supports and autonomies that it wants to make. And that's not sort of an off-the-shelf product. That all being said, definitely like there are a lot of best practices that will definitely sort of be incorporated here.
And just around that, that's where I think the mayor's point is really important, that even though there are all these performance management, it's a Lawrence solution where we need to build. And the other thing I just want to point out, I think the model of your organization is really interesting, like leveraging, in this case, graduate students to do work, both in, to get them exposed to these systems, and then, as your documents say, eventually run them and maybe work in them. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of lessons learned. We got a lot of talent, in our students and others. And I just wonder, as a way of both exposing them to the real challenges of system leadership, and then also, monetizing it a little bit, like getting
Definitely,
them
and
experience. Like, it's just a really cool motto.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We're in our 10th year now, and I'm happy to sort of continue the conversation offline if you have sort of any further questions. But it's been something that has attracted a lot of attention from a lot of really just top caliber students from really so many different graduate programs. And we also find the other interesting thing without going on, because I can for a while, as I'm sure you can imagine, but the fact that the students are bringing really different perspectives coming from different graduate programs, from quantitative programs, from law school, business school, we find that those sort of combination of background and training also is really an interesting mix. Thank you.
Other questions? Maddie, I would be curious just to hear, in your experience, either developing other frameworks or other frameworks that you use as reference points, what are some of the criteria that you see beyond test scores
Sure.
that communities are using to
Sure.
Evaluate how their schools are doing?
Sure. So I think that the number one bucket that when we sort of look at DESE and think about what additional bucket is on our mind, the main one is school environment. And that is sort of a couple different terms are thrown around. Some people call it school culture, school climate, school environment. But that really gets at a lot of those factors such as school safety, availability of support, that just aren't going to come through in those purely quantitative quantitative numbers that are often reported at the state level. There's a couple different tools once you sort of decide on which specific metrics you're interested in. There are a couple different tools that can be used to collect that data. A lot of the data comes from surveys. So those are surveys that are distributed annually to students, to parents, and they'll ask questions such as rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, how supported you are when you go for extra help to the teacher or something along those lines. There's also quality review is another tool that can be used to get a sense of some of those factors. But I definitely think that that sort of general bucket will be something that we're excited to sort of speak with people at Lawrence about, including members of the Family Resource Center who we're actually meeting with tomorrow and are really excited about that conversation.
Do you see also within this work teacher surveys and looking at teacher morale as
Definitely.
A way to, measure how well school,
Definitely.
school's doing?
I think that there's a lot of focus on sort of general teacher experience and whether both sort of on the output side but also on the input side in terms of do teachers feel that they're being supported? How are they rating their professional development opportunities? Because that could be, for example, a metric where if they're not feeling supported from a professional perspective, they're not well positioned to, in the future, help their students achieve positive outcomes. So it's all about thinking about those leading indicators that will help us get a better sense of, is this school set up in a couple years for those numbers that are being reported at the state level to move? Because if a lot of those leading indicators aren't in place, then it's not, it can't be expected that those lagging indicators will actually show progress.
Other questions?
Going back to the graduates topic, are
Sure.
we trying, what are your ideas on which group of graduate students will come to Lawrence? Are these students that were maybe from Lawrence, or are these students that are definitely like outside of
Sure. Well, two of my students are sitting next to me here today. So all of these students are enrolled in graduate programs. So they've already completed their college education. Most of them have also amassed professional work experience and now are back enrolled in a graduate program. So right now, we don't have any like Lawrence graduates that are enrolled in our program. These are students that are pulled from sort of the Columbia University community. I think that you do sort of raise a really interesting point, though, that talking to graduates from Lawrence as part of our stakeholder engagement is a really great idea, and I'm actually really glad that you mentioned that.
Other questions? Joseph's part of our early college program, is that? Joseph is part of our early college program, which
Okay.
we're very proud of and is the best in the state. But I'll let you find that out on your own. All right, any other questions? Anything else you would want to add?
No, that's all on our end.
Okay, great. We
Thank you
thank
so
you for
much.
coming. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the work you're going to be doing.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We have one more matter under the chair's report. Some of you, or maybe all of you, will remember from last year, we have to take an annual vote relative to school choice participation. Every district in the state has to do this as part of the Ed Reform Act of 1993, which is to make a decision about whether Lawrence Public Schools will participate or not in the Massachusetts School Choice Program. This gives students the ability to, or would allow students to effectively take their per pupil expenditure and try to choose another district. We voted not to participate last year, the primary reason being for lack of space in Lawrence Public Schools, and it's because it's got to be a two-way road if you opt into this. So unless there are any questions
I'd like to make a motion to approve the
would be
motion
a
as presented.
Yep, so I have a
To not
motion on the floor not to participate in the Massachusetts School Choice Program for the 2021 school year. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries, and Lawrence Public Schools will not participate in the Massachusetts School Choice Program for school year 2020-2021. I have minutes, and a backlog of them. Chair would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on November 13th, 2019. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Second, motion has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, the motion carries. Chair would accept a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 11th, 2019.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the executive session held on January 8th, 2020?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on January 8th, 2020?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Minutes have been approved. Any final comments, questions, any updates, news, anything that any members would like to offer? Great. At this time, I would accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. At this time, we are adjourned. Thank you.